I still remember the exact moment the email hit my inbox. Subject line: promotion announcement. Congratulations to Emma. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. I had led the entire campaign, built the team from scratch, stayed through nights when even the cleaning staff had gone home. I'd missed birthdays, skipped family dinners, and worked myself raw because this promotion, the senior project manager role, was promised to me. But when I opened that email and saw Emma's smiling face under the heading, "Our rising star," something inside me cracked. Emma wasn't a rising star. She was my boss's girlfriend. The same woman who'd joined the company just 9 months ago. The one who used to ask me for help writing her reports. I stared at the email for a long time. The fluorescent light above my desk buzzed faintly, and the office chatter dimmed around me. My cursor blinked on the screen like it was mocking me, a tiny pulse of everything I had wasted. Then came the laughter from the corner office. His office. Their laughter. It was faint but sharp enough to cut through the air. I looked up through the glass walls. He was standing behind her chair, leaning down too close, whispering something that made her giggle and cover her mouth like a schoolgirl. And just like that, 5 years of loyalty turned to ash. I gathered my breath, forced a polite smile when a colleague passed by, and walked straight into the restroom. My reflection looked foreign. Dark circles, brittle hair, and eyes that had forgotten what confidence looked like. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb. I splashed water on my face and stared at the droplets running down the mirror. Maybe it wasn't personal, I tried to tell myself. Maybe corporate politics just played out this way. But deep down I knew the truth. It was personal. For years I had been the one doing his dirty work, fixing his mistakes, cleaning up his presentations, even lying to clients to protect his ego. He'd always say, "You're my right hand, Sarah. Your time will come." Turns out my time came, and he gave it to his girlfriend instead. That night I didn't sleep. I opened my laptop, went through every project file, every message, every email chain, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized something. His success wasn't built on talent or leadership. It was built on me, and I had proof. Emails where he had taken credit for my strategies, messages where he bragged about managing the optics, even invoices he manipulated to hide certain consulting expenses. Expenses that, when traced, led to one name, Emma. The next morning I walked into the office calm and composed. My resignation letter sat neatly in my folder, along with something far more valuable. A collection of digital receipts, internal memos, and a timeline only I could have built. He saw me coming and smiled, the smug kind that says I won. "Sarah," he said, straightening his tie, "I was going to talk to you about your future here." "I already know my future," I interrupted softly, placing the letter on his desk. "And it's not here." His smile faltered. He tried to play the mentor again, pretending to care. "You're overreacting. These decisions come from higher up." I leaned in just enough for him to see the fire in my eyes. "Then you might want to let the higher-ups know they've been paying for a personal relationship instead of a professional one." His face went pale. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled faintly. "You'll see." And I meant it. Because I wasn't just walking away. I was about to make sure that when I left, I'd take every piece of his carefully built empire with me. Not by shouting, not by begging, but by letting the truth speak in front of everyone who once applauded him. The days that followed my resignation felt strange, quiet, almost too quiet. I showed up at work like nothing had happened. My 2-week notice was in motion, but I wasn't leaving quietly. Not yet. He thought I'd just fade away, that I'd swallow my pride, pack my desk, and slip out while he and Emma celebrated their little victory. But he didn't know me. He didn't know that silence wasn't surrender. It was the sound before the storm. I spent those 2 weeks like a ghost moving through the building, gathering everything the company had forgotten I could see. Every report I had written, every client I had saved, every credit he had taken. All of it sat in neatly labeled folders now. Not out of spite, but out of preparation. The truth had a way of revealing itself, and I was going to let it do so in the most public way possible. It started small. I scheduled a meeting with HR, not to complain, not to beg, but to wrap up transition documents. During that meeting, I casually mentioned a few inconsistencies I'd found in billing. The HR manager's eyes flicked up fast, her polite smile fading. She asked for details. I promised to send them before my last day. Then I spoke with a senior client, one who had trusted me personally on a multi-million-dollar campaign. I mentioned that I was leaving, thanked them for the partnership, and gently hinted that they might want to check how recent payments were logged. No accusations, no drama, just a breadcrumb. And like clockwork, the whispers began. I'd pass by the coffee machine and feel the conversation stop mid-sentence. People looked at me differently, not with pity but curiosity. They sensed something brewing, something big. Meanwhile, Emma was drunk on her new title. She walked around with that hollow confidence of someone who hadn't earned her crown. She started sending out instructions, copying me. Of all people, on emails she barely understood. I replied with patience and precision, making sure. Meanwhile, Emma was drunk on her new title. She walked around with that hollow confidence of someone who hadn't earned her crown. She started sending out instructions, copying me. Of all people, on emails she barely understood. I replied with patience and precision, making sure every correction was traceable. Every typo she made, every error she ignored, every piece of evidence showing she was out of her depth, I saved it all. And my boss? He acted like nothing was wrong. He kept his smug composure, as if the world would keep revolving around his lies forever. I'd catch him glancing at me sometimes, suspicious, calculating. He could sense the shift, the air thickening around him, but arrogance kept him blind. One afternoon, while he was in a meeting with upper management, I received a message from an unknown number. "You really think you can take him down?" No name, no signature, just that. I smiled at the screen, because whoever sent it had just confirmed what I suspected. He was nervous. Maybe it was Emma. Maybe it was one of his loyal assistants. Either way, it meant I was getting close. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone had gone. The city outside glowed blue and gold through the glass walls. I plugged in a flash drive, encrypted, untraceable, and began copying files. Email trails, project audits, transaction sheets. Every byte was a weapon. Every click was a countdown. By midnight, I had everything I needed. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the skyline. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. The next morning, I arrived early and watched them stroll in together, laughing, holding coffee cups like they owned the place. Emma gave me a little wave, smug and dismissive. He didn't even look at me. That was fine. They wouldn't be laughing for long, because my final day wasn't just a goodbye. It was going to be a reckoning. I had already set up the presentation. A mandatory knowledge transfer meeting scheduled for the entire department, including HR, finance, and the executive board. The email went out under my name with a simple subject line: Project Legacy, final handover by Sarah Walker. Everyone thought it was just me being diligent, wrapping up loose ends before I left. But what they didn't know was that the presentation would reveal everything, not just the stolen credit, not just the manipulation, but the money trails, the personal expenses, the affair hidden under corporate budgets. Every secret he thought he buried, deep inside the company. Walls was about to echo across every floor of this building. And when that moment came, when every eye turned to him, I'd be standing right there, calm and smiling, watching the man who stole 5 years of my life finally pay for every single one of them. The morning of the meeting, I woke up before dawn. The city was still half asleep, glowing faintly in the fog, and I could feel something pulsing under my skin. Adrenaline, fear, maybe both. I knew there was no turning back after today. Either I'd end his career, or he'd find a way to bury me. By 8:30, I was in the office. My desk was almost empty now, just a single laptop, a flash drive, and my resignation folder. People greeted me softly, uncertainly, like they sensed this wasn't an ordinary last day. When the clock struck 9, a notification popped on every monitor. Project Legacy, department-wide briefing, conference room A. Within minutes, the room filled with faces, managers, coordinators, HR reps, finance officers. Even the company VP, Mr. Landon, showed up. The atmosphere buzzed with polite confusion. My boss walked in late, of course, with Emma glued to his side, pretending to check her phone but clearly watching me. He gave me that corporate grin, the one meant to remind everyone who held authority. "Sarah, let's make this quick," he said, his voice smooth but tight. "We've got other priorities today." I smiled back. "Of course. I think this will be worth your time." The lights dimmed, and the first slide appeared on the screen. At first it was ordinary, a summary of past campaigns. The metrics, the growth numbers, the kind of content everyone expected. But then the tone shifted. Slide 5. A side-by-side comparison of team achievements, one column under his name, one under mine. Each campaign listed, each award, each client success, all with timestamps showing who actually executed the work. I had highlighted the sections where he'd taken public credit. The room fell silent. He cleared his throat. "Sarah, this isn't really relevant." "Oh, but it is," I said calmly. "It's about accountability. Legacy, remember?" A few quiet chuckles rippled across the room. People who had long suspected but never dared to say it. Then came the next slide. Invoices, corporate records showing consulting fees, and training reimbursements. Numbers that didn't make sense until I clicked into the payment destinations, all routed to an account under a different name, Emma's maiden name. Her face went pale. My boss's jaw tightened. "Stop this presentation," he said sharply, stepping forward. But the VP raised a hand. "Let her continue. I want to see where this goes." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed even. "Of course." The next slides unfolded like a confession the company never knew it was hearing. Emails with time-stamped edits. Him deleting my name, replacing it with his. Screenshots of internal chats where he mocked staff, joked about keeping HR busy, and bragged about rewarding loyalty in unconventional ways. Every sentence drew the air tighter. Every image was a nail in his coffin. He tried to interrupt again, but the VP turned to him sharply. "Is this true?" He stammered something about context and personal misunderstandings, but it didn't matter anymore. I clicked to the final slide, a simple white background with one line. 5 years of silence, one moment of truth, and then I closed my laptop. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, alive even. You could feel it pressing against the walls. HR whispered to each other. Finance was already pulling out calculators. Emma looked like she might faint. Finally, I spoke. "That's all from my end. I'll send my final documents to HR by noon." And then I stood, gathered my folder, and walked toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. Voices overlapping, chairs scraping, phones buzzing. My boss's voice rose above the noise, desperate now. "She's lying. She's twisting data. You can't just believe." But he was drowned out by questions, by accusations, by the sound of truth breaking free. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I stepped into the corridor, my phone vibrated. A message from a coworker. "Sarah, it's all over the internal chat. People are calling it the presentation of the decade." I smiled faintly. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from release. 5 years of swallowing my pride had ended with one morning of pure, public reckoning. But even as I walked away, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because corporate justice has layers, and I had just peeled back the first one. The elevator ride down from that conference room felt like falling through silence. My pulse was still racing, my palms damp, but beneath the adrenaline was something colder. Clarity. I had done it. The truth was out, and the man who once thought he could play me like a pawn was now choking on his own lies. But I wasn't done, not yet. Corporate scandals don't die in meetings. They get buried, polished or spun until they look like misunderstandings. I knew he'd try that. I knew by the end of the day, he'd be in damage control mode, twisting narratives, deleting files, calling in favors. So while he scrambled, I prepared the second phase, the kind of revenge that doesn't just destroy reputations, it rewrites them. The first step was timing. At noon, I scheduled a delivery, a flash, drive mailed anonymously to the company's ethics board, containing every document, every transaction, and every message I'd archived. I didn't use my name. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation could. Next, I reached out to a journalist I'd met years ago, a woman who once covered workplace inequality stories. I didn't reveal everything, just enough to get her attention. A major firm, executive favoritism, misuse of funds, and a whistleblower ready to expose it all. She called me within an hour. Her voice was low, careful, but thrilled. "If what you're saying is true, this could blow up fast. Can you verify it?" "I already have," I said, sending her the anonymized folder. By late afternoon, my boss's office blinds were closed. You could tell from the tension in the hall that something was unraveling inside. HR had locked down access to certain systems. People whispered about internal reviews. Emma hadn't been seen since the meeting ended. Still, I kept my composure. Smiled when people congratulated me on my graceful exit. Pretended to be done with it all. But that night, I sat by my apartment window, laptop glowing in the dark, watching the first spark catch fire. The journalist had published the story, front page of an online business magazine. Corporate love affair tied to promotion scandal and expense misuse. Names weren't mentioned yet, but the clues were clear enough that anyone inside the company could connect them. And they did. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from coworkers, LinkedIn messages from old clients, even a few anonymous numbers offering support. Or thanks for doing what we couldn't. The company's PR team scrambled. They issued a statement about integrity and internal review processes, but it was too late. The internet doesn't forgive, and it never forgets. The next morning, the media camped outside the building. Cameras flashed as executives slipped through side doors. HR scheduled emergency meetings. The VP sent a company-wide email announcing a full investigation. My boss tried to contact me. Calls, messages, even an email that started with, "We need to talk. I can explain everything." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded his message to the journalist. She knew what to do with it. By evening, another article dropped, this time with screenshots, quotes, and confirmed sources. My name wasn't in it, but everyone knew. At that moment, I realized something powerful. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of truth spreading like wildfire, while your enemy stands alone in the smoke. The next day, a memo went out from the board. Effective immediately, Thomas Hale has been suspended pending investigation. Thomas Hale, my former boss. The man who once said, "I'd never survive without his mentorship." Now he couldn't even survive a headline. Emma's name appeared too, quietly listed as placed on indefinite leave. I read the memo twice, then closed my laptop. My apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. I could have stopped there. I could have moved on, content with justice served. But I wanted more than justice. I wanted accountability, the kind that echoed. So I sent one final package, to every client we had ever worked with. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was revelation. Inside each envelope was a letter, brief, factual, and devastating. It listed project discrepancies, overbilling patterns, and performance falsifications signed by him. I didn't accuse anyone. I just presented the numbers. Within 2 days, contracts were frozen. Clients began pulling out. And the company that had once made me feel invisible was now bleeding. From every corner. All because they underestimated the woman who kept their walls from collapsing. 3 days later, I walked back into that building. Not as an employee, but as the ghost of every lie he'd ever told. The lobby buzzed with whispers. Cameras waited outside and reporters leaned against the glass, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man at the center of the scandal. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy, as if the air itself knew something irreversible had happened. The receptionist, someone who once barely acknowledged me, looked up with a mix of awe and apology. "They're in the boardroom," she whispered. I didn't have to ask who they were. When I pushed open the glass doors, the room fell silent. The board sat in tense rows, documents scattered like shrapnel, and there he was, Thomas Hale, pale, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, clutching a folder like it could save him. He froze when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" His voice cracked between fury and fear. I smiled faintly. "Just returning company property." I placed a small box on the table. My ID badge, my access card, and the flash drive that started it all. The VP leaned forward. "Ms. Walker, I think you should hear this." Thomas tried to speak first. "This is a witch hunt. She's framing me. She's been bitter ever since. She didn't get the promotion." I didn't say a word. I just watched him unravel. The VP slid a document across the table, an audit report. "Our investigators traced the payments. The accounts are linked directly to your personal cards, Thomas. Emma's too." He stuttered something about technical oversight, but the VP cut him off sharply. "We also reviewed your correspondence. You falsified signatures, you manipulated expense logs, and you approved your girlfriend's promotion while concealing your relationship from the board." He went silent. The room's air shifted, from accusation to condemnation. I stepped closer, looked him right in the eye. "You once told me hard work doesn't guarantee recognition, that politics decides everything. I guess you were right." For a moment, he looked small, just a man cornered by his own arrogance. Security entered quietly. The board didn't even have to speak. They just nodded. Thomas Hale was escorted out of the building in front of everyone. Cameras flashed through the glass. Reporters shouted his name. The man who used to control every narrative was now a headline he couldn't rewrite. I stood by the window, watching him disappear into the chaos outside. And for the first time in years, I felt something deeper than victory, freedom. No screaming, no tears, just silence, and the sound of justice finally breathing. After that day, everything changed. Not instantly, but steadily, like the first rays of dawn pushing through a long night. The company issued a public statement 2 days later. Integrity must be non-negotiable. They didn't mention names, but everyone knew. Within a week, Thomas Hale's LinkedIn profile vanished. Emma deleted hers too. The empire they'd built on deceit crumbled quietly, piece by piece. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt still. For 5 years, I had poured everything into proving my worth, waiting for someone to see it. And when they didn't, when they stole it, I built my revenge from the ashes. But now, standing in the silence of my apartment, I realized something. Revenge doesn't fill the void. It only clears it so you can finally see what's been missing. Peace. I started consulting for smaller firms soon after. Word traveled fast. The whistleblower, who stood up to her boss, became a quiet legend in the corporate circuit. Some admired me, others feared me. I didn't care either way. For once, I was building something that belonged entirely to me. One morning, months later, I received an email. Subject: "We'd like to discuss a partnership." It was from one of our biggest former clients, the same one I had warned before everything collapsed. When I met them in their office, the CEO shook my hand firmly. "You did what most people wouldn't have the courage to do," he said. "You protected integrity when the people above you failed. We'd like you to lead our next project on your terms." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just smiled, nodded, and finally said, "Thank you. I'll make sure it's worth it." As I left their building that day, the city felt different, brighter somehow. Even through the same gray skyline, I thought about everything that had led here. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fire that had nearly burned me down. It was strange. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't need to, because in the end, he had taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that some promotions are just traps in disguise, and some losses are freedom wearing a mask. I walked away lighter than ever. My story now whispered in corridors where I'd once been invisible, not as the woman who was denied her promotion, but as the woman who turned her resignation into a revolution. People think revenge is loud, a moment of fire, a scream of triumph, a cinematic ending where your enemy burns and you walk away in slow motion. But that's not what it felt like. When the dust settled, there was no music, no applause, just silence. The kind of silence that lets you finally hear your own thoughts again. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I'd spent so long chasing recognition that when I finally took it back, when I exposed everything he'd stolen, I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty, like I'd spent years holding my breath and didn't know how to breathe normally again. It took time, weeks of waking up early with no meetings to rush to, evenings spent looking out at the skyline without checking my email every 5 minutes. Slowly, that silence stopped feeling empty and started feeling free. I began to understand that revenge, at its core, isn't about destruction. It's about reclamation. You don't do it to ruin them. You do it to remind yourself that you still have power, that their betrayal didn't define your worth. It just revealed theirs. For years, Thomas had convinced me that loyalty was strength, that silence was professionalism, that patience would be rewarded. But what I learned, painfully, beautifully, is that loyalty without respect is slavery, and silence in the face of injustice is complicity. I think about that sometimes. How many people sit in offices like I did, watching someone else get rewarded for their sweat, their sacrifice, their brilliance, and still say nothing because they fear being labeled difficult. Maybe that's why my story spread so fast. Because deep down, every working person knows what it's like to give everything and be invisible. After the scandal, I received hundreds of messages, some congratulating me, some confessing their own stories of stolen credit and quiet humiliation. One message stood out. "You gave me courage. I'm done being silent." That single sentence meant more than every apology, every offer, every headline. Because that's what real revenge does. It doesn't just even the score. It creates ripple effects. It frees others who were too afraid to speak. Months later, I crossed paths with someone from my old department at a networking event. She looked nervous to approach me at first, but then she said, "You know, the company's completely different now. HR has changed policies. They have anonymous reporting. They even started leadership ethics training. I smiled. Took them long enough. She laughed softly. It only happened because of you. And for the first time I realized, maybe my story wasn't about revenge at all. Maybe it was about balance. The world doesn't fall apart when truth is spoken. It realigns itself. One night, as I sat at my desk working on a new project, one that I owned, one that carried my name, I opened the old email chain that started it all, the one that announced Emma's promotion. I didn't feel anger this time, just distance. 5 years ago, that message broke me. Now it was just proof that sometimes being denied what you deserve leads you straight to what you're meant for. The journey from anger to peace is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You keep returning to the pain until you've seen every layer of it, until you can finally touch the memory and feel gratitude instead of rage. That's where I am now, grateful not for what happened, but for what it taught me. Because I learned that revenge doesn't have to destroy you. It can refine you. It can strip away everything false, the fear, the self-doubt, the need for approval, until all that's left is you, uncompromising, unapologetic, unbroken. Sometimes I wonder what Thomas is doing now. Maybe he found another company to hide in. Maybe he's still blaming everyone but himself. Or maybe, just maybe, he looks back on the moment they escorted him out and finally understands what he created. I don't hate him anymore. Hate was just a bridge I had to cross to get to freedom. And now, on the other side of it, I've built something stronger than revenge, self-respect. Every time I walk into a meeting room now, every time someone looks at me with that quiet recognition, I carry one truth with me. You don't need their permission to be powerful. They can deny your promotion, silence your name, erase your credit, but they can't erase your worth. Not if you refuse to let them. Revenge gave me closure, yes, but reclaiming myself gave me peace. And that, I've learned, is the real ending every story like mine deserves. This is Karma Unfolded, where every secret finds its reckoning. Don't forget to subscribe.